Are you an executive who constantly feels overburdened and always on the clock? Do you feel that you've created an environment where people are always looking for you to come up with answers? Regardless of the fact whether or not your compassionate tank of giving and intellectual capital is running on empty. Well, here's the good news. If you answered yes, you're not alone. According to a November 2024 study by my friend at the Harvard Business Review, they report a significant number of executives wish that they had more time in the day. Approximately 80% of executives feel drained after a full day of meetings and believe that they would be more productive if they didn't have to spend so much time at the head of a boardroom. The study also goes on to reveal that the large majority of executives also believe that their time isn't spent on the most strategically important tasks. This is something that my friend Michelle Niemeyer knows all about in her journey through a demanding legal career and the ups and downs. She experienced burnout, but found her way back through the art of what she calls bending time. She's a keynote speaker and workshop facilitator who now helps busy people gain at least 10 hours a week of their time back to enjoy their lives without having to quit their jobs or lose track in their careers. Her keynote program, aptly named The Art of Bending Time, helps people to become more connected and resilient, productive, and focused on improving profitability, retention, and overall happiness, both at home and at work. She says her work is all in an effort to make businesses more profitable while watching employees thrive. And Niemeyer joined me this week to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. Michelle, if you're ready, I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program, my
Absolutely.
friend.
Let's go for it.
And I'm super excited to be with you this afternoon. Thank you for a few minutes, my friend.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. So, Michelle, I know the work that you are currently doing now stems from your nearly 2 decades in a legal career that saw you burn out, my friend, and you were inspired to help other people sort of reclaim their time by introducing the art of bending time, my friend. So I'm wondering if you can start our conversation by telling me about your legal career, what you're doing now, and what makes you so fabulous, my friend.
Oh, thank you. So my legal career kind of comes in a few different phases. I started out working in a larger firm and traveling around the country doing insurance coverage law for insurance companies. And in that role, I got to do a lot of work that wasn't what typical lawyers do, and it was a blast. I got to travel all over the country. I got to stay in nice hotels and eat great meals and work with big teams of other lawyers And it kind of worked that, frankly, today I don't think exists so much because most lawyers now sit at their computer looking at documents that are on a computer system, and depositions are taking place on Zoom, and there's all kinds of things happening now that prevent that sort of travel and gather with other people part, which was the part I loved. And then I moved to Florida and I started working as a lawyer in a more traditional sense. I was always in litigation. Um, and I was in a law firm, two different law firms. And then I started my own practice and I was working on my own. And then I brought in a paralegal and I had like three people working for me for part of the time. And around the time I was probably 20 years into my career, like you mentioned, I got very, very burned out. This was in like 2012. And I really just stopped feeling anything joyful. I hated my job. I resented my clients for what they were asking of me, and that I'd ask them for things I needed and they wouldn't respond. And it was like every little thing compounded that was negative, and I wasn't seeing any of the positive. And I got very withdrawn. I started to feel like I couldn't get things done. Like I just didn't feel like doing the work. And I'd have everything would get pushed off and I'd be procrastinating until I hit a deadline. And then I'd have to pull an all nighter to get the work done. Or I'd have to work until 3 a.m. or whatever. And it got to be like that for quite a while. I had a friend say to me one time at that point, I was like, I'd said to this friend, I just feel like I can't get anything done. And he said something really interesting, which was, I don't understand what's wrong with you. You made it through law school, so you've got to be able to get a lot of work done. And how did this, like now it's like you can't focus for an hour. And I even thought I might have ADHD. And after a while, I tried to do some things that were more like just exercising and eating differently, and I did that for a while, and then that helped a little. I was feeling a lot better. And then I got an autoimmune disease diagnosis. And, that was very scary. When I got that diagnosis, I started out by just diving into researching because I did a lot of medical related stuff as a lawyer. And so I knew how to do medical research. And I started doing research about the disease I had and about autoimmunity in general and how do you deal with it and all this stuff. And then I ended up attending a health coaching school to learn more about it. And what ultimately happened was that I started working on really like just getting to know more and more about this stuff and deciding, okay, I've got to change all these things. I got toxic stuff out of the environment in my house. I actually moved off my boat. I'd been living on a boat for 8 years, and I moved onto land into an apartment, in part because there are so many chemicals and solvents, and there's a lot of stuff in boats that maybe isn't the best to live with all the time. Mm-hmm. Then I was exercising more again. I ate mostly raw foods for a while. Then I cut out gluten, and I realized I'm allergic to gluten. It was like a whole bunch of stuff. And after a while, I realized I felt better, like totally felt better. I was focused at work. I was enjoying work. I was connecting again. Like the stuff that I had seen where it was kind of like my life was like receding away, it was coming back. And at some point, I looked at all of this and I said, is there a common thread here? Like what, first of all, before I realized I had these things going on, who was I then? And what were my concerns then? And I realized my concern then was I was always too busy for everything. If my friends asked me to do something, the first words out of my mouth were, I'm too busy. I don't have time. When everything was focused on the next deadline, it was always stress, it was always chronic, and it was always something that I felt like I had to do, whether it was for work or for a volunteer group I was part of. And I was doing all these things, and it was like I was just spinning. And the art of bending time came out as my solution to that. How do you get the most out of your time, and be healthy?
That's certainly a fundamental question. I think that we can all benefit from finding the answer to, my friend. So tell me, Michelle, I'm curious, how do you think busy professionals can go from overwhelmed to feeling fulfilled? Because certainly in today's society, everything is like instant coffee. We always want an answer all of the time without, taking a moment to consider options and possibilities. So how do you think busy professionals can go from overwhelmed to fulfilled, not only in their work, but in their life as well, my friend?
Well, I think the first step, and obviously there's always first steps, right? You want to start and you want to get it right. So the first step is really to get, how do I put this? You want to start seeing the sparks again that light you up. And in my experience, that means stopping for a moment, being present. And it's not big stuff. A lot of times it's not like I have to have this great big giant goal, and when I reach my giant goal, I'll be happy. Or I have to win this case, and when I win this case, or when I get this client, or when I make a certain amount of money, or when I buy that car or buy a house, right? I'll be happy. You can't, the thing I realized was that it's in the little things, it's in those little moments every day that you get the satisfaction that fuels you. So I call it sparks, because I feel like it's kind of like if you have a campfire, right? You want to start it with sparks, and then you're going to build that fire and you're going to keep it going. And the way you're going to do that is by finding proactively and intentionally making sure that you're getting those things that light you up in your everyday life, whether it's at work or at home.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, my friend. And Michelle, I know that you've done a little bit of research on me, and I talk to organizations all the time about the importance of finding balance and finding balance in terms of prosperity and production, my friend. So, from an organizational and personal perspective, how do you think busy professionals can live thriving lives and sort of eliminate or reduce the amount of self-destruction in their lives? Because I know that's a big part of the work that you do. So I wanted to give you the platform to tell me all about it.
Yeah, and when you're talking about the amount of self-destructive, I'm guessing you're talking about things like people drinking too much, people using drugs, that kind of thing. Is that what you meant?
Yeah, and sort of their personal life, and when it comes to the organizational piece of it, sometimes self-destruction can be, we have to get a certain task done at this certain point of a deadline without enjoying the journey. So how do you think we can achieve balance and eliminate self-destruction? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and there are, it's interesting. I'm glad you bring up the organizational versus the individual, right? We're part of a team when we're in an organization. And one of the things I think we can do as leaders in organizations is get really personally connected with the people on the team so that we understand who are they and what lights them up, right? If I'm making a point of getting those sparks of light in my day every day, and I have certain things about my job and about just life in general that light me up and make me happy. Maybe I'm a person who gets lit up by having contact with other people. Maybe I'm somebody who loves to tell everybody about X, Y, or Z, and I'm kind of a natural recruiter. I'm somebody who, if I love a product, I tell all my friends. If I think something's really good, I want to share it. Or maybe I'm somebody who loves to create things and loves to see that finished product. Or I'm somebody who really enjoys research and gets into that piece of it and is really intellectual or strategic, right? If you can identify in your team, what are the things about your team members that light them up, then you can find ways for your team members to get that in their jobs.
Yeah.
So you see what I mean? You can structure the way you're doing the workflow, and you can make sure that somebody who loves to be the teacher gets to be the one who trains the other people in the group. Or somebody who loves to make the calls gets to make some of the calls. And when you do that, when you're respectful of what people enjoy and get fulfilled by, you can take your team's dynamic and you can highlight what people are strong at and enjoy. Now, obviously, you can't do that all the time. There's going to be boring stuff that nobody wants to do. There's going to be things about people's jobs that 100% is never going to be what lights them up and what they love. But if you can even just give somebody some of that every day, like let's say you've got somebody whose job mostly is data entry or data, some kind of focused, they're working at a computer all day, they're not talking to other people, but there's somebody who needs interaction and they need to be acknowledged and they need to feel like they're interacting with the people around them. If that person has some part of their job that gives them 15 minutes a day of connecting with other people, it's going to be better for them than if they never get to talk to people.
Yeah,
and you can make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I always say that diversity of perspective comes in many different ways, doesn't it?
Yeah. And the other thing is that people tend to be quicker and more focused and better at things that give them that kind of joy, right? So do you want the person doing data entry who just hates it, but it's their job and they're getting a paycheck? Or do you want the person doing the data entry who's all about focus on the details and getting it right and loves to do that? And there are people who love that. I'm not one of those people, but if I was, I know people who are really detail oriented and really good at that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Michelle, it's ironic that I'm having this conversation with you at the tail end of July. And I'm sure you know that July is National Disability Pride Month, my friend. And I'm curious to get your perspective on how people with disabilities can be a winning asset to improving organizational culture. And I know that your autoimmune sort of diagnosis changed your perspective on life. And as you know, I have cerebral palsy. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the importance of why celebrating disability pride is important and the positive benefits to bringing people with disabilities into the workforce. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
I think that everybody comes in with positives and negatives, right? And burdens and things that they can give. And like I mentioned, when you have people who are, someone has a disability, whatever that disability is, and they've fought through that takes grit, right? That takes strength just to get to that job and to be there every day, or to give what you need to give in an environment that's demanding of you while you're also dealing with hard things outside of work can be, it's a signature, it's a sign of strength, and it's a sign of resilience. And on the other hand, it's also something that can give the person a reason to have a feeling of accomplishment, a feeling of connection with the people they're working with. And it's not just the people at home, right? So it's all really important. And, I think in whether it's a visible disability or it's a mental health issue or it's somebody has a difficult family life at home, everybody has these burdens that they tend to counterbalance with, balance can be used in different ways. And, I'll give you an example, and this is a personal one for me. And, it's, I'm sure, the truth for a lot of people. I had I'll just call it a very unsupportive marriage partner. And that meant that he was threatened by my success financially and the amount of time I spent as a lawyer. He was very negative about my capabilities. So when I started my own law firm, he would tell me that I was a bad business person, that I had no business starting my own thing, that I was never going to succeed. So it was like I left work where it was hard enough, and then I went home and I had like an opponent in my household. And for me, my success and the challenges in my office, the things that I did in work, were what gave me the strength, because I could go there and I could go, I'm not stupid, I'm not lazy, I'm not these terrible things, right? I can do all these things. I'm actually pretty good. And, ironically, I think in a way that, quote unquote balance, and I'm not a big fan of what people call work-life balance, because I think it's really about your own personal balance. And it's about getting what lights you up in all the parts of your life. And it's about living out your values in all the parts of your life. If you're doing that, you're going to do great. But, often what we're doing is we're grasping onto one thing, holding onto it for dear life because we don't feel comfortable about the other thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So, what I encourage people to do is find those things that light them up, be very, very present in the moment, and make sure they're getting those things in their entire life, and don't cut off one part of your life from another. If you had, for instance, I see people who include their spouse in things that are related to work, and they know each other better because of it. They're more supportive of each other because of it. And they feel like they have that person in their corner that they can come home and they can say, hey, remember this person we met at that conference or whatever, and I'm trying to get their business. And then there's a collaboration, and it's not just, I'm at work over here and I'm at home over here. And they don't meet. And now I've got a spouse who's jealous over here when I'm at work over here because I'm not paying attention to them, or they feel like it matters to me more than them, or something like that, right?
Yeah.
And that's one thing I see a lot with these work-life balance, when it becomes sort of a corporate edict, and it's people, they're trying to attempt to create some sort of we respect your personal life or whatever, right? It gets to a point, I've actually spoken to people in leadership in some places who don't feel comfortable talking to their employees about their personal lives. And if you can't talk to people and make friends with them and get to know each other on a level that's beyond, here's the task for you today, how do you ever build a cohesive team where people feel connected and valued?
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle, I just finished a presentation this morning all about disability pride and valuing people. And one of my core messages was that your people are the strongest asset within an organization, and getting to know them on a personal level will elevate the level of productivity within an organization, right?
Sure.
So I totally agree with you, my friend.
And I think that's a wall we need to break down. And it's something that when you grab onto that, when you get to know people on a human level and you include them in your whole life, you're a whole human being. I like to say we're not lobotomized people like in the TV show Severance, right? Where there's work life and there's home life. We're one whole person. And when we eliminate part of who we are in a context, we're not bringing to the table everything that of value that we can offer that context, whether it's home or work.
Well, the biggest asset we have is the ability to start conversations. We just have to take that leap, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And that's the first step, no matter what, getting to know each other. There's so much evidence now that connection is actually very closely tied to longevity. It's tied to people's health as they age. People who have very low connection, who are lonely, who are disconnected from people, they tend to have a higher level of Alzheimer's. They tend to die younger. I mean, it's important to have good levels of connection in your entire life and to build that over time. And, I think it's very highly tied to burnout as well. Like I said, I mean, one of the signs, very classic and constant sign of burnout is people withdrawing and being disconnected. So I feel like there's an obligation when you're working with other people to pay attention to that. If you see the people around you, somebody tends to always hide behind their closed door and they didn't used to, or they used to come have lunch with people and now they don't. Don't just assume, oh, that person must be looking for a job, or, oh, that person, for whatever reason isn't connecting with us anymore. Be proactive about it and talk to them and say, hey, is everything okay? Why don't you come to lunch with us today? Sometimes getting somebody out of that burned out state is reconnecting them into the fold, so to speak, bringing them back to being connected.
Taking the leap of connection. Absolutely, absolutely. But so one of the ways we can get our time of connection back is better managing our time, both in our life and at work. And I wanted to get your perspective on this, a study that LinkedIn released this year. They released a study that said that 82% of today's executives don't have systems in place to manage their time. And as a result, 95% of their work performance is affected by friends. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on those statistics and how we can help executives better manage their time. My friend, what are your thoughts there?
Well, my whole program is about better managing your time.
That's why I asked the question. Yeah.
I will tell you, there's all kinds of different systems, so to speak. You could use a Kanban system. You could use a calendar. You could use reminders on your phone. There's all those things, right? But I think really the most important thing about managing your time is having a really good clarity about who you are, what lights you up, what your values are, what's important, what matters to your long-term goals, your organization's goals. Like, you need to have a really good sit down with yourself, so to speak, to have a really good understanding about the things that matter to you. One of the things I do with the people that I'm working with, and I do this with businesses sometimes as well as a workshop for teams, is I work on what we call a SWOT analysis. And I have a kind of a character in my program. I call it Time Suck Ninja. And my goal for everyone who works with me is to become a time suck ninja. And by that I mean to eliminate the things that you do intrinsically that prevent you from getting things done, or you don't get as much done, to teach you how to eliminate things that are outside distractions that will prevent you from getting things done that you need to get done, to have this ultimate clarity on who you are and what you want. And then to identify what are your goals and where are you on this, and to make a roadmap, right? Because if you don't have a plan, and so what happens with these people who don't have a system, what's really happening to them is they don't know what matters. They're in a reactive mode all the time. So they're doing what needs to be done today because that's what the deadline is, or that's what somebody has told them. They haven't looked in a bigger picture sense and created, okay, this is the most important stuff. This is how to get it done. This is how I can make it possible in my own amount of time by probably having a team and having other people do parts of it, right? But you need to do that in a way that makes sense. And then you need to be able to track it, and you need to be able to take action on it. You can't do that without that map.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michelle, selfishly, I wanted to ask this question because I know that you're a professional speaker as well, my friend. And
Yes.
one of the things that I do outside of hosting this podcast is I talk to organizations about the importance of embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workforce. But I also talk to people about the importance of authentic connection in leadership, my friend. So I'm curious, as a speaker, what do you think is the best advice you can offer about connecting with an audience? Because I truly believe that sharing personal stories of both resilience and overcoming obstacles and relating it to pain points within an organization is key to success as a speaker. And I'm curious to get your thoughts there, my friend.
I agree. I agree. And I think the most important thing really is to understand who your audience is. So if you're going into an organization and somebody's bringing you in, you want to find out from that person as much as you can. What are the challenges you're facing? Who are the people I'm talking to? What are their concerns? How are, what kinds of things have you noticed in your group, in your workforce? And it's not always the same. It's going to be different in different parts of the world. It's going to be different for different industries. There's standard things that are just human that affect everybody, but not everybody is affected the same way by different things. And so if you can have an understanding about that industry or about that group, that conference, whatever, who those people are, you're going to have a better way, you'll be able to better target what you're sharing and speak to them about what concerns them.
Yeah, absolutely. And leading with emotion can be a superpower as a speaker sometimes, can it?
Oh, for sure. And being honest. I mean, and leading with emotion, if you're a person who handles that well and carries that well, that's awesome. I've also seen speakers who kind of like come across like they're not really being themselves when they're doing that. And that can be a disaster. So, you need to be real. And when you're being real, I got to tell you a funny story. My first ever jury trial, I represented a young lady who was raped by her pastor when she was 16 years old. And her father was one of the witnesses who testified. And initially, for whatever reason, he hadn't really believed her when she told him what happened. And he felt very guilty about it. And in the trial, now keep in mind, lawyers, the worst thing you can do as a lawyer is get emotional. You're supposed to be, you're presenting the story and you're presenting it in a compelling way, but you're not supposed to get emotional. And I was asking questions of the dad, and he started crying on the witness stand. And I started crying, and the judge started crying, and then we had a break. And it was like unbelievable. But the fact is that, when people are being real about real things, there is emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And you should show the emotion, but it has to be real. If that wasn't planned, the dad broke down because he felt so bad about what happened. He had practiced with me in my office, and that never happened. But it was just, I guess, in the context of being in the courtroom and all the pressure and looking at his daughter sitting there at the counsel table with me, he lost it. And, I've seen speakers who have teared up and had to stop, and the audience is right there with them, and man, is that effective. But it has to be real.
It has to be an authentic point of connection, absolutely. And Michelle, I'm curious to ask you about mentors in your personal and professional lives and the people that have impacted you to do the work that you do today and the person you are today, my friend. So talk to me about of the important mentors or figures in your life, my friend.
I had a mentor in Boston when I first started practicing law. His name is Marty. And I met him I went to law school at Boston University, and he was part of their alumni group in DC, and I met him there. And we had lunch every week for years. I'd have lunch with Marty, and I'd tell him about stuff that was going on, and he'd give me advice and whatever. He had the funniest thing. He had two things he said, and both of them I thought were brilliant, and both of them I've tried to carry forward in everything I do. One of them's kind of silly, one of them is serious. One of them was he had his own law firm, and I want to say they were about 10 or 12 lawyers. They specialized in representing journalists in First Amendment claims, like when they got sued or when they had contract negotiations, that kind of thing. And he said to me, when I hire people, I don't want to hire anybody who isn't smarter than me. I want to be the dumbest person in the room. And really, when you think about that, how brilliant is that, right? There are so many managers who are threatened by people who are smart. They don't want anybody else to be the smartest person in the room because they want to be the smartest person in the room. But if you have a team and you're managing a team of people and everyone in that room is brilliant, you're going to have an amazing team as long as you give the people the value they bring, right? So I love that advice. And the other thing he said that was just awesome and hilarious was he said, you can only live once, you can only be young once, but you can be immature forever.
I'm going to steal that. I like that. What?
And, you know, I mean, he could be silly and funny and have fun. And the more, like when I went through the time where I was burned out, I realized, you know, we get burned out when we're trying to be this always responsible, always producing, always the one in charge, always the one who's taking care of everything. And, you know, like, okay, let's just laugh for a while. Let's have some fun for a while. And it's amazing how just kind of having that level of fun that comes with immaturity, right, is incredibly lightening to us.
Yeah,
in giving us a sense of joy and letting us really like kind of let go of all that heavy stuff that brings us down. So I love that.
Yeah, I do as well. And it leads into my next question. I wanted to ask you about how do you think wellness from a personal perspective is connected to productivity at work? Because there's an important through line between the two. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I never would have known this when I was younger. You know, I think unfortunately, and okay, you look at this. I was a swimmer starting at 5 years old, and I swam all the way through high school and in part of college. And then I started running. I was always physically active. I wasn't always a good eater. When I was a kid, my mom served us decent meals, but I also, like, if there was Hostess in the house, I ate the whole box, right? And I gained weight as a teenager, and I had a lot of issues that now I look back and I go, these things were related to what I was eating, but I didn't know it at the time. So, you know, as a late teenager, young adult, it was terrible acne, it was depression. It was a lack of focus after a certain point. And you know, even to the point where at some point you may see memory issues, like short-term memory issues, because you're not healthy. And, you know, these things are directly tied to what now we know are precursors to autoimmune disease. And, you know, a problematic microbiome that over time the healthy stuff is dying off and the bad microbes are proliferating because of how you eat or because you're not active. And that all leads to, are you sharp? Are you focused? Are you able to stay focused in the moment and not be completely scattered and distracted all the time? And if you're somebody who becomes highly distractible, your productivity goes in the crapper, right? Because if you need to focus on something to get it done, but you're constantly noticing that there's a pop-up because there's an email that came in, or a text came in, or somebody walked by your door in the hallway, or the sun is in your eyes, or, there's so many things that can distract you. And as you become more distractible, a lot of that is related to your physical health. Like, people don't realize that. It doesn't seem like it, but it can be. There are studies that show that exercise and proper diet are very effective with depression, with ADHD, with anxiety, and all those things can affect someone's productivity. So you might not be diagnosed with one of those problems, but you may be a little more in that direction than you would be otherwise, and not know it because you don't get there quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Michelle, I wanted to get your take on how, ambitious people can sometimes overshadow the importance of enjoyment. Because, if you don't enjoy what you're doing, your level of personal investment, I always tell organizations that you have to be personally invested in rowing in the same boat if you want to accomplish the same goal, my friend. You may have different ways of coming to that goal, but if you're not personally invested into something, then your level of execution will suffer. So I'm curious, how do you talk to ambitious people who really think that their sense of accomplishment is always accomplishing the stated objective without the piece of enjoyment along the way? What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Well, honestly, I think it's a recipe for disaster. That's almost, it's like that's how people become burned out. So if you're ambitious, there's nothing wrong with ambition. Most people with a good job are ambitious people. They had to get the education, they had to get the job, they've worked hard in the job. Now maybe they're a manager and they're working toward being a higher level manager, or they're looking for the C-suite job, or whatever, they want to be a founder. Whatever that ambition is, they have ambition. Like all the people who are in a good job got there because they have some level of ambition. But if you're not following the things that light you up, and that also goes towards mission, right? That goes toward purpose and having fulfillment in providing a service, for instance, that is really great for other people, that makes them happy, that you see the joy in somebody because you did something for them, or you invented something that helped humanity, or you sold a certain number of things, and because you did that, your family is getting a lifestyle that gives you joy. Not everybody loves their job, but if you're getting that joy, and that's where I'm also saying, I mean, the work-life balance thing, to me, it's not really fair. So you do have to be part of that team, for sure. You do have to have connection to what you're doing, because there's going to be hard times, and there's going to be big crunches, and there's going to be stress. And if you're doing that for something that you can't stand behind and you don't feel fulfilled by doing it, there's going to be a point where you're just like, what am I doing? You're exhausted, you're depleted, and on top of it, you're not doing something you feel good about. So, definitely you want to have a connection to the mission, but you also want to have a connection to what lights you up and makes you happy, and does that connect with the mission? And if it isn't completely aligned, how can you make them connect? Because I don't tell people, I think you should quit your job and go sell sunglasses on the beach because you're not happy being an accountant. That doesn't make sense. But you may be able to find ways that you are doing something as an accountant that makes you feel great. Like maybe you want to help people who are have small businesses, and you want to see them thrive, and you dedicate part of your service to that. Or like in the legal world, a lot of lawyers can do pro bono work, and maybe they're making $800 an hour working for their corporate clients, and that's paying the bills, but they're spending a small percentage of their time helping single moms navigate getting custody of their kid and making sure they can afford to live and have all the resources they need. You know, like, there's always a way to make sure that you're getting those things that make your heart sing, and you just have to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Michelle, this leads into my second to last question. And you know, if I give you 10 minutes to sit in front of a room of executives or ambitious people, and I ask them, ask you to give them your top 3 tips on the importance of prioritizing what's important to you. So I'm curious what those tips would be in terms of the importance of prioritizing your priorities. What would you tell them, my friend?
Well, I actually work through a project with people, and I do this with teams and I do it with individuals. And like I said, you need to have a roadmap, right? You can't accomplish things without prioritizing. And some of it we do naturally. We know that something's on a deadline and it has to be done now. But you want to make sure you're doing the most important stuff. I'm sure you've heard of the 80-20 rule, that 20% of the work gives us 80% of the results. And so 80% of the work is junk, right? 80% of the work isn't maybe even something that you should be doing. Maybe you should be cutting it out completely, or maybe you should be finding somebody else to do that work. Maybe you should be outsourcing it or using AI or whatever it is. So one of the things that I have people do is we do this thing called a SWOT analysis, and we take 3 really big goals and we look at it and we consider what are the strengths of that. Considering that goal, what do I have right now? What are my strengths in this? It might be for your team. Who do we have in our team who can do these things? And do we need more people? Do we need resources? Whatever it is. What are the weaknesses? What are the risks of doing this? Is it going to be something that is going to cost us money for a low possible reward? Is it something that it has a really high level of risk as far as success or not? Is it taking us away from something that matters? And then what are the opportunities that goal could bring to us? And then when I'm done and we've gone through that whole process, and whether it's as a team in a company or as an individual, then I say, really quick, first thing that comes to mind, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you want this? And here's the crazy part. You'd be shocked how many people, they kind of pause and then they say, oh, I don't know, maybe a 5 or 6. Well, if your great big giant goal that you're putting resources into and you're putting time into and you're counting on it and you're taking away other opportunities for it is only a 5 or 6, why are you pursuing that goal? And so that's one of the things that I like to do with people, is to get them to be really aware of where's our time going, and are we spending time doing things like taking night classes for a graduate degree that we don't really need, but our parents made us think we had to have it. Or whatever that might be, right? There's all kinds of goals. Losing the same 10 pounds every year. When joining a gym in January and dieting for a few weeks isn't good health. It's just, you're just filling in time, you're using resources, but you're not even getting to the good health you need, right, by doing that. So I like to do that and use that sword. I call it like the weapon of the ninja, right? The time suck ninja has a sword. And I literally use that to cut out the weeds, cut out the junk that you're spending time on that you think is important because it's something you've carried along for a long time, but maybe it doesn't fit who you are now as a company or as an individual. And maybe it's better to be putting your resources elsewhere, because you can't do everything. We have to make choices.
I totally agree with you, my friend. I tell people that we make time for the things that we prioritize, and it's important to know how to interpret that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And Michelle, my final question has to do with your personal and professional legacy, my friend, and how you want that to be defined.
How do I want that to be defined? I want to know that I have given the tools to thousands of people, if not hundreds of thousands of people or more, so that they can live their best lives without crashing and burning. And they can enjoy great lives of accomplishment and friends and family and connection and good health. And they can catch on to that before they get to a point where they get sick or where they get disconnected from their friends and family or where they lose their job or, lots of bad things happen when people get burned out.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, my friend, I think you're doing great work and helping people understand the importance of themselves as individuals in the same context of their professional life, my friend. And I want to commend you for the good work that you do and for joining me to engage in conversation. And before I say goodbye to you, my friend, I want to know if people want to get connected with you. What's the best way they can do that?
I really like to use a texting device. I think I gave you a link. So if it doesn't work from Canada for your Canadian friends, they can also use a link in the show notes. But what I ask people to do is text the word clarity to 33777. So if somebody's listening right now, I would say just pull out your phone while you're listening to this right now and text to the number 3377, the word clarity. And that'll get you into my community. And the community has tools. So if you look for the tools, it has an exercise. It's like a guided meditation with journal prompts to help you get that clarity, to figure out what it is that lights you up. And it also has a form for that SWOT analysis we talked about, where you can help analyze your big goals and make a decision about how much do you want this or not after you've really looked at it thoroughly and decided how it fits you of today or maybe you of tomorrow in your goal sense. Is this something you still want to do? And if it is something you want to do, it helps you make the roadmap to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Michelle, as I mentioned, I think you're doing a yeoman's work and making sure that executives and everyday people value the importance of their own life and making their own sort of a declaration of victory, my friend. So I want to thank you for being here and for the good work that you're doing and for engaging in conversation with me this afternoon. It's most appreciated.
It's been a pleasure. It's nice meeting you, Kevin.